Hello, thank you so much for joining me on this second video. Part two to my first one are Christians today, some of the dumbest people you've ever met. And hopefully, I can answer that question a little bit differently as to why I believe in Jesus Christ. I know that there are so many people who have been hurt by the Christian church. I know that there are a lot of people who hear that they're not worthy, that they're sinful, that they shouldn't love the people that they love, shouldn't want to get married to the people that they want to get married to, all these types of things. And hopefully, as we go along, I can explain my point of view. But today I'm not here to talk about that. I'm here to talk about the one reason why I believe in Jesus Christ, and not what a church says, not what other Christians say, not what tradition says. And because in most churches, frankly, you're not going to hear about what I'm about to talk about. They think it's too complicated. They think I don't know. It's not a topic that's rarely talked about. 25 years ago, when I started questioning Christianity, when I started questioning my church upbringing, I'd been embarrassed. If you've heard my video, I was very hurt by the things that had happened to me in school, being made a fool of, bullied, because I didn't have any answers to my faith. And instead of thinking, well, I'm just going to walk away, I'm just going to forget faith, forget God, forget Christianity, I actually started to learn more about it so that I could destroy other people's faith. And so this is what I'm here to talk about, what made me a believer in Jesus after all of that. I encourage you to go look at part one, and hopefully that'll help you. But I know that many people say, you can't prove God, that everybody's just kind of wandering around and thinking, oh, they believe this, they believe that, they believe in God or gods or their God, or there's no heaven, there is a heaven, and all these types of things, and that you can't really prove God exists. And so it's just based on what you think is what you believe. And maybe you're right, maybe you're wrong, but you'll find out at the end. I hope today to give you something to ponder. This worked for me. This is what I've discovered. This is what I've spent 25 years of my life studying. It hasn't been always throughout that 25 years, but if you calculate the amount of hours I've studied, read, thought about the things that I'm going to go through the next two videos, it's been quite a number of hours. And so I would disagree. I would try to put out evidence to say that we can know that God exists, and hopefully these next couple of videos will show you can put your faith in something that's real. Again, this worked for me. This is what made a difference in my life, and all I can do is share it. I know that there's many experts out there who talk about the historical accuracy of the Bible, who talk about the logical, rational arguments for Christianity and the evidence that is behind it. I'm not disputing that. I'm not arguing with it. I'm not. That is not my area of expertise. I learn about it. I think it's very interesting, but it isn't what changed my life. So today, in this video, I hope to share something that changed my life, and it might change yours. Most Christians don't talk about this topic because it takes faith to talk about the future. Christians have talked about, I'm sure you've heard of the the terms mark of the beast, rapture, Jesus' second coming. And a lot of these people have come and gone, and they've said, Jesus is coming, and turn out to be wrong. What is it? I think there was a book called The 88 Reasons That Jesus Was Coming Back in 1988. And then when Jesus didn't come back in 1988, 89 Reasons Why Jesus is Coming in 1989, I think was the next book that was released. And I'm not here to set a date. I'm here to share what I believe is going on, what I believe the Bible talks about. If you understand the Bible, it is a prophetic book. There's a lot of passages that when you look at the dates that the different individual books were written, it talks about the future. 30%, almost 30% of the Bible, from Genesis to Revelation, is about the future, is about the second coming of Jesus and the events that precede that event. That if you want to think of the Bible as a story, think of it as a story. This is the epic ending of the story. I want to take it and see if that story is true. And so that's the first part that we need to talk about. It is very complex. It is very confusing because it's a thread that runs all the way through the Bible. It's not just in Daniel. It's just not just in Revelation. It is throughout the entire Bible. This is the grand finale of the whole story. And one of the things that Christians believe and why they believe in Jesus is the prophecies that he fulfilled when he came the first time. As I mentioned in the first video, I'm going to examine 2 chapters. If all I had was 2 chapters out of the entire Bible, I believe that I can answer or help answer. I'm not saying that this is perfect, but I'm saying that this is what made a difference for me. That I'm going to try to use 2 chapters out of the Bible to answer some very important spiritual questions. Jesus fulfilled over 300 distinct prophecies when he came the first time. And this page, if you got the website up top, shows that it says here, conservatively, Jesus fulfilled at least 300 prophecies in his earthly ministry. You can see here the Old Testament reference and then the New Testament fulfillment. Old Testament reference, New Testament fulfillment. And it goes on. And it goes on. And it goes on. It goes on, and it goes on, and it goes on, and it goes on. Okay? So there's people who have done extensive work on the first coming of Jesus when he came the first time and the claims that he made and all the things that he fulfilled. Now, as a skeptic, the easiest answer would be, okay, well, the Jewish people who wrote the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and Paul for his epistles, all that they would have to do is just go through the Old Testament, see what prophecies there were about the Messiah that was to come, and write about the events in the New Testament and say, oh, it's fulfilled. I don't agree with that. I think there's a lot of evidence, but in my first video, I said that I would concede to every objection in the past. And so I'm going to concede that let's say that happened. One of the things that the Bible continues to do, though, when Jesus did come to the earth, and again, if you believe that Jesus, don't know if he existed, then I encourage you to check out Dr. Bart Ehrman, who's a skeptic, who talks about that there is plenty of extra-biblical evidence for Jesus' existence. Now, he doesn't believe that Jesus is God, but he says that from a scholarly point of view, there's absolutely no doubt that Jesus Christ, the Jesus of the Bible, existed. And we don't need the Bible to prove it. There's enough extra biblical evidence. the question that comes down to it is not whether Jesus existed or not. It's whether he is God. Now, there are many people who say, well, the Bible says things about the future, the apocalypse, and all these types of things, but Nostradamus and different people have prophesied in the about things in the future that I remember, I think it was 2012, the Mayan calendar was supposed to end and all that kind of stuff. And of course Christians throughout the last few decades especially have given dates, have given events that have frankly turned out to be untrue. And I hope to go through in the next video some of those objections, some of those reasons why that's the case. But we want to understand that the Bible talks about Jesus coming back and the subsequent event, or the preceding events that are going to lead to that second coming, that there are about 500 prophecies in that 30% of the Bible that talks about his second coming. And so we've got more stuff that needs to be fulfilled than Jesus had in the first time that he came. But I'm going to just cover a few of them. This particular website talks about the mathematical probability that Jesus is the Christ, that Jesus is the Messiah. So here it says here that after what they did is that the scientific probability attempts to determine the chance that a given event will occur. A professor at Westmount College has calculated the probability of one man fulfilling the major prophecies made concerning the Messiah. The estimates were worked out by 12 different classes representing some 600 university students. The students carefully weighted all the factors, discussed each prophecy at length, and examined the various circumstances which might indicate that men had conspired together to fulfill a particular prophecy. They made their estimates conservative enough so that there were finally unanimous agreement even among the most skeptical students. However, the professor then took their estimates and made them even more conservative. He also encouraged other skeptics and scientists to make their own estimates to see if his conclusions were more than fair. Finally, he submitted his figures for review to a committee at the American Scientific Affiliation. Upon examination, they verified his calculations were dependable and accurate in regard to the scientific material presented. For example, concerning Micah 5:2, where it states the Messiah would be born in Bethlehem, the professor and his students determined that the average population of Bethlehem from the time of Micah to the present, then divided it by the average population of the earth. During the same time period, they concluded that the chance of one man being born in Bethlehem was 1 in 300,000. After examining only 8 different prophecies, they conservatively estimated that the chance of one man fulfilling all 8 prophecies was 1 in 10 to the power of 17. That's 10 with 17 zeros. The professor gave the illustration. If you marked 10 tickets, then place the tickets in a hat and thoroughly stir them, then ask a blindfolded man to draw one, his chance of getting the right one is 1 in 10. Suppose we take 10 to the 17th, so 10 with 17 zeros behind it, silver dollars, and lay them on the face of Texas. They'll cover all of the state 2 feet deep. Now mark one of these silver dollars and stir the whole mass thoroughly all over the state. Blindfold the man and tell him that he can travel as far as he wishes, but he must pick up the one silver dollar that has special mark on it. What chance would he have of getting the right one? Just the same chance that the prophets would have had of writing these 8 prophecies and having them come true in any one man from their day to the present time. So I'm going to look at some prophecies and I'm going to explain what the Bible talks about as far as the future and where we're at if these things are to be true. So you can also look here, Old Testament prophecies fulfilled by Jesus Christ here. Again, it references fulfilling of 8 prophecies, 1 in 17, 1 to the 10th, 1 in 10 to the power of 17. One person fulfilling 40 prophecies, 1 chance in 10 to the 157th power, and 1 person fulfilling 351 prophecies. Astronomical. Again, I'm showing you this not to talk about the prophecies of the past, but the prophecies written about in the future. So the one chapter that we're going to talk about is Matthew 24. Now, to give you a little bit of background about Matthew, scholars agree that the book of Matthew was written between 70, some say 66, say 70 AD to 110 AD. So early in the first century. There is no way that anyone in the first century could know what the world looks like today. And I'm going to show you. There's a misnomer that Christians, when you read the Bible, Christians had always believed that Jesus was going to return. And there's a reason for that. When Paul wrote, the Apostle Paul wrote the books that he wrote, some say it's between 55 to 70 AD, maybe later, somewhere around that time frame. Jews existed in Jerusalem, and there was a temple. And I'm going to show you why that's important to future biblical prophecy. However, after the temple was destroyed, and we're going to go through that, and the Jews were scattered out throughout the world and didn't reside in Israel anymore. It became very evident to the people who followed Bible prophecy, or the words that Jesus spoke, that this was not going to happen anytime soon. And so that's why, and like I said, we'll go through this. So in Matthew 24, Jesus went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples came up to show him the buildings of the temple. And Jesus said to them, "Do you not see all these things? Assuredly I say to you, not one stone shall be left here upon another that shall not be thrown down." So him and his disciples are looking at the temple. And the second temple kind of looks something like this. It was from 516 BCE to 70 CE. That's when it was destroyed by the Romans. So we know this. This is history. So Jesus is saying that they've come out of the temple. He's saying this temple that you see here, which is the second temple, is going to be destroyed. And then it goes on. Now that he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, "Tell us, when will these things be, and what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age?" This is the one verse that really kind of changed things for me. Like I said, I'd grown up, and when you grow up in Sunday school, it's almost like, I remember being at band practice, practicing the instrument. You hated doing it. You only did what was, some people loved, but the instrument and stuff, and I enjoyed it, but putting in the effort and the practice, that was difficult for me. And the same thing came with the Bible. I went to church, I learned the verses, I learned the stories, but I didn't go home and study it. And I had better things to do, but reading the Bible was for Sunday church, that was about it. When I discovered this verse in this chapter, this really changed my mind on things, and started to get me to think about things, because they're clearly talking about the future here. Now Jesus hasn't died yet, and he's just sitting with 12 guys on a hill, and they're having this conversation. And so what Jesus did is something kind of surprising, because you would think that if you wanted people to believe your message, you can talk about the common day things of the message, right? Like what is going on in the world at that point, and all the good things that he was talking about, very applicable to the people at that point. But here's a question that talks about the future. And he could have said, "You know what? I'm the Son of God. That is forbidden knowledge. That's for me to know and you to find out," kind of thing. And these things are unknown to human beings. Like he could have just, not said anything, or just talk like that to avoid the whole question in the conversation. But instead, Jesus takes this entire chapter to talk about events in great detail, about what is going to happen at the time that he's claiming that he's going to come back, and what the end of the age will look like. And so we're going to examine those things. Now, skeptics often hear Christians say that, Jesus is going to come back. And then they read the next verses. And Jesus said to them, "Take heed that no one deceives you, for many will come in my name, saying, 'I am the Christ,' and will deceive many." And so skeptics say, well, okay, so it's been 2,000 years since Jesus lived, since these books were written. And of course, there's been many people who have come and gone, who have said that they're the Christ. How do we know when this time is? It could be any time, it could be never. We just don't know. And then the next verse, and you hear wars and rumors of wars. See that you're not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines, pestilence, and earthquakes in various places. All these things are the beginning of sorrows. And again, the comment is, okay, so we've always had wars and rumors of wars. We've all had pestilence and earthquakes. One of the things that I find about reading the Bible and studying this stuff is that the Bible has a great way of kind of underplaying what is going to happen. And hopefully as we go through the video, you're going to see this, because I had a conversation the other day and I was talking about how unfortunate, one of the volcanoes, I think it was St. Vincent, the island of St. Vincent, had gone off or was looking to could kind of become active. And I said, there was, I think, 7,000 people who needed to be evacuated from their homes. And I was talking to this person. I said, it's sad to me that 7,000 people have to, be just just removed from their home. And if this volcano, blows, then there goes their entire home, their entire life. Just, they'll never be able to go back because it's just a small island. And the person got upset at me because they know that I talk about Jesus' return and Bible prophecy and all this type of stuff. And they got mad at me because they're like, "Oh, you're always talking about the end of the world and that, Jesus is coming back and it's volcanoes and earthquakes and all that kind of stuff." And they got upset at me. And I said to them, okay, hang on a second. Just because I'm talking about a story in the news about the volcano going off and people's lives being affected doesn't mean that I'm talking about the end of the world. When a super volcano goes off and spreads ash over a continent, then talk to me about that we might be near the end of the world. See, this is what I'm talking about, is that when we look at the scale of these things, Bible prophecy, when you examine it in its entirety, is very underwhelming language for things that are going to reshape the planet. And that's what I want. When we're talking about earthquakes, I'm not talking about there's an earthquake here in this place and there's an earthquake there in place. I'm talking about, you will know, if these things happen, then you will know it's earth-shaking earthquakes. It's global pestilences and disease. It's global famine. It is global war. And so these things are on a massive scale. And that's what I want, just the message that I want to bring to you. And so when we go forward, they say, okay, so we've had World War I, we've had World War II, there's been nations, the Roman Empire, even in Jesus's day, had massive wars and conquered a great territory. So how do we know when the time is? And I hope that you're going to be able to see there's really only one time that we can be talking about. But we know that the end event, the epic event, is Jesus' return. That's what everything is leading to in this story. But Jesus talks about this verse here, right here, 32 to 34. Now learn this parable from the fig tree. First of all, we know that when Jesus talks about a parable, he's not talking about an actual fig tree. He says the fig tree represents something else. But we're going to continue. When its branches already become tender and puts forth leaves, you know that summer is near. So you also, when you see all these things, know that it, and if you go down to here, some translations say, or he, is near at the doors. Assuredly I say to you, this generation will by no means pass away till all these things take place. Okay, so a bunch of gobbledygook. Words are English, but what does this mean? When I come across a passage like this, take it. I usually actually, it's kind of like one of those questions where you have to read it all the way to the end and then work backwards to hear what the question is actually asking. That's kind of what Bible prophecy sometimes does, is that it's good to take the passage and work your way backwards so you can get the context. So what Jesus is saying, when you learn this parable of fig tree, whatever the fig tree is, when it comes to life, when it starts blossoming and putting forth its leaves, you know that the summer is near, that the time is near, that when you see all these things that he's listed in this chapter, you know that he is near at the doors. Assuredly I say to you, this generation will by no means pass away till all these things. So the fig tree, whatever it is going to bloom. It's going to let you know that summer is near. You're going to see all these things that he's listed in this chapter, and then he's going to return. And in a generation, that is all the things that are going to take place. So the way that you understand this passage is, whatever the fig tree is, that's the beginning. We're going to see it bloom, come to life, put forth leaves, and we're going to see all these things that he's listed in this chapter after the fig tree is bloomed. Then we know that a generation will not pass till all these things take place. Well, how long is a generation? Well, there's a lot of debate whether it's 120 years or 80 years or 40 years or whatever it is. The point is that it says here, so you also, when you see all these things, know that it is near at the doors. I would surmise that this is one lifespan. That the generation that sees the fig tree bloom, the group of people that see the fig tree bloom and come alive, will see all these things and will not all pass away till he returns. One lifespan. Now, I don't know if that's 80 years. I don't know if that's 40 years. I don't know if that's 120 years. It's obviously not 40 years because we live longer than 40 years. But I'm not going to put a date on it. I'm going to show you some of the things so that you can decide for yourself whether this is accurate. But this is what as people who have studied understand this passage to be. We have one lifespan. Just like Jesus came and he fulfilled all the things in his one lifespan, we have a lifespan here, whatever number of years that is. But that that people who see this fig tree bloom will also not all pass away till he returns. So, does the Bible talk about anything about a fig tree? Well, if you search fig tree, you're going to come up with 44 verses, 44 Bible verses about a fig tree. And you can go through all of them. It's a very easy search to do. And what you're going to find is that they all refer to the Jewish people in the Promised Land. Whether it's that they're going to inherit the Promised Land, they're going to take over the Promised Land, they're in the Promised Land, they're going to come back to the Promised Land. All these verses, these 44 verses of the fig tree, talk about Jews and Jewish people in the Promised Land. After Nebuchadnezzar, for example here, after Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had carried away captive Jeconiah and son of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, and the officials of Judah with their craftsmen and smiths from Jerusalem, well, that's funny, there's Jerusalem today, and had brought them to Babylon, and the Lord showed me, behold, take 2 baskets of figs and set before the temple of the Lord. One basket had very good figs, the first ripe figs, and the other basket the very bad figs, which could not be eaten due to the rottenness. Then the Lord said to me, what do you see, Jeremiah? And I said, figs, the good figs are very, very good, and the bad figs very, very bad, which cannot be eaten due to the rottenness. Then the word of the Lord came to me, saying, thus says the Lord your God of Israel, like these good figs, so I will guard as the good captives of Judah. who I have sent out of the place into the land of the Chaldeans, for I will set my eyes on them for good, and I will bring them back again to this land, and I will build them up and not overthrow them, and I will plant them and not pluck them up. I will give them a heart to know me, for I am the Lord, and they will be my people, and I will be their God. For they will return to me with their whole heart. But like the bad figs, which cannot be eaten due to the rottenness, indeed, thus says the Lord, I will abandon Zedekiah king of Judah and his officials, and the remnant of Jerusalem who remain in the land, the ones who dwell in the land of Egypt. So, figs, Judah, Jerusalem, God of Israel, the people, Jewish people. This is about the Jewish people. If you look at Hosea 9:10, I found Israel like grapes in the wilderness. I saw your forefathers as the earliest fruit on the fig tree in its first season. So, when you look at all these verses, they'll connect to this one thing: the Jewish people in the land of Israel, the promised land that the Bible lays out. Well, in Jesus' time, there was Jewish people in Israel. In 70 AD, the temple was destroyed, and by 130 AD, the Jewish people had been part of the diaspora. And the diaspora is the dispersion of the Jewish people to the part of the world. So here it says here, Jews thus far, even before the destruction of the temple in 70 CE, and that's when they started being dispersed throughout the world. That's why Second Temple went to 70 CE. Okay, so, but then the creation of Israel on May 14th, 1948. After almost 1900 years, the Jewish people returned back to their land that the Bible talks about. And I'm not going to get into the politics. I'm not going to get into the dispute of who you might think that the land belongs to. I'm simply saying that for almost 1900 years, there was no nation with Jewish people in them called Israel. And May 14th, 1948. And so when the Bible talks about the fig tree, it talks about the Jewish people in the land of Israel, in the promised land, which is defined as the land of Israel in the Bible, that Jesus is talking about the parable of the fig tree is Jews in the promised land. This is why until the diaspora, until the destruction of the temple, Christians believed that Jesus could come back because there were Jews in the promised land. They were in Jerusalem. But after the destruction of the temple and the conquering of Jerusalem, and then the diaspora, and where they got spread out throughout the entire world, then Christians knew that this wasn't going to happen until the fig tree was reborn again. This is why Christians today talk about Jesus' return, because there has to be a nation of Israel. There has to be Jews in that land. And the amazing miracle is that throughout that almost the 1900 years, they kept their traditions, they kept their beliefs, and they have their own land. Now, what is a generation? If we've got the bookends of the events of the parable of the fig tree being the Jewish people back in the land, we know that it's going to be a generation, and then Jesus is going to return. That's the time frame. Now, if this is wrong, then we're not going to have to wait much longer. Because, and I'm not putting a date to this, but I'm simply saying that the population of many of the richest countries in the world have life expectancy of 80 years. In 2019, the life expectancy in Spain, Switzerland, Italy, and Australia was over 83 years, and in Japan, the highest was close to 85 years. As of the recording, Israel has just celebrated its 73rd year. So, if those who were born on May 14th, 1948 are now 73 years old, and they will all not pass away before Jesus returns, then we don't, again, I'm not going to say whether it's 80 years or 85 years. I'm saying that it's one lifespan for all these things to take place, just like as it was one lifespan in Jesus's life for him to fulfill all the 300 prophecies to show that he was the Messiah. And again, I'm not here, look, I love the Jewish people. I believe that Israel is their God-given land. I'm not here to talk about the politics, whether I agree with them or not. I'm simply here to say that I believe that that is their right. That land is their land. And it's interesting to me that a land that is the size of New Jersey has become a focal point in all the world. New Jersey isn't the focal point in all the world. I don't think I ever hear anything about New Jersey. But that's the size of this nation. And yet it has the attention of the United Nations. It has the attention of the superpowers of the world, of China, Russia, US, and many other nations around the world. It has their attention. It's a focal point in the Middle East. So it's interesting to me that this tiny little country with this small group of people compared to the rest of the nations of the world has this kind of attention. But so now we have the time frame. And we're 73 years into that generation. Now maybe it is 120 years, maybe it's 80, I don't know. But I'm simply saying that these people who saw Israel born May 14th, 1948 will not all pass away, and they're now 73 years old. So let's take a look at some of this. Again, I'm not here to criticize the Jewish people. I'm simply here to share some information. The one thing separating Christians and Jews, which is no surprise, is that Christians believe that Jesus is the Messiah, and the Jewish people don't. And that has always been. If I talk to a Jewish person, they know that I'm a Christian. They know that there's that distinction. And so I'm not here to criticize. I'm simply sharing what I believe that Jesus said at the time that he lived, and whether these things are coming to pass. So Jesus said to them, "Take heed that no one deceives you, for many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ." But now if we scroll down, Jesus says, "Then if anyone says to you, 'Look, here is the Christ,' or 'There,' do not believe it, for false Christs and false prophets will rise and show great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. See, I've told you beforehand. Therefore, if they say to you, 'Look, he is in the desert,' do not go out, or 'Look, he is in the inner rooms,' do not believe it. For as the lightning comes from the east and flashes to the west, so it will be the coming of the Son of Man be." So what Jesus is saying is that be careful of a person who comes and says that he is the Christ. In John, Jesus says, "I have come in my Father's name, and you do not accept me. Yet there will be one who come in his own name, and him you will accept." So Jesus warns the Jewish people about a false Christ. There will be other ones, but there's going to be a false Christ that will do great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. Now, because the Jewish people don't believe that Jesus is the Messiah, that they've always looked for the Messiah to return or to come to them, it's interesting to see what the change has been in recent months. And so if we look here at Israel today, as of October 15, 2020, Israeli rabbi says he's already holding meetings with Messiah. A snapshot of Israel's spiritual hunger as biggest rabbis are afraid to leave the country lest they miss Messiah's coming. So they're not saying that they're waiting for the Messiah. They're saying that the Messiah is already here. And one of the things that Jesus warned in this one generation was that there's going to be a Messiah who's going to come, one that, obviously, if Jesus is the Messiah, if that's what that's what Jesus claimed, then any other ones would be a false Christ or a false Messiah. From this standpoint, because he's saying that for him, he's going to come back in the clouds, right? It says here, immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from heaven and the powers of heaven will be shaken. The sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven, and then all the tribes of the earth will mourn as they see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. So Jesus is saying, this is how I'm going to return. And I find it interesting that in the generation that Israel becomes a nation, not only are they awaiting the Messiah, they're saying he's already here and he's going to be revealed very shortly. This article, July 21st, 2020, Israeli rabbi reveals date of Messiah's arrival according to Kabbalah. So it says here, in the following year of Tafshin Shin Pei Bet, September 2021 to September 2022, a year of Jubilee, on Yom Kippur 2021, the Messiah will reveal himself and then disappear, the rabbi explained. Yom Kippur 2021 falls on the night of September 15th until the nightfall of September 16th. And it says here, between Yom Kippur 2022-2023, the Messiah will make his second appearance and will see the final redemption. The rabbi added as a disclaimer that the Messiah can theoretically arrive sooner, but that he is basing his analysis on the Kabbalistic teachings of the Ramchal as well as the Talmud. Pardon me, I'm not familiar with some of these words, so I apologize for the butchering of them, but you can read it for yourself. And so, again, it's interesting to me that these things are happening. If we go back to Matthew 24, it says here in verse 15. So in verse 1 and 2, Jesus is talking about the destruction of the temple. We know that happened in 70 AD. But here it says in verse 15, therefore when you see the abomination of desolation spoken by Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place, whoever reads, let him understand. Let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. So there's a couple of things I want to talk about. So remember, Jesus is talking to his 12 disciples on the Mount of Olives. He's saying these are things that are going to happen in one lifespan in the future. There's going to be Jewish people in Judea. That's interesting because there are Jewish people in Judea. It says here, and pray that your flight may not be in winter or on the Sabbath. Jewish people are there. They celebrate the Sabbath. They keep it as a day of rest. So there are different things. So what is the holy place? There's going to be an abomination of desolation that's spoken by Daniel, caused by the holy place. Well, if we go to Daniel 9, which is what Jesus is referencing, verse 27, it says, then he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week, but in the middle of the week he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering, and on the wing of abomination shall be one who makes desolate, even until the consummation which is determined is poured out on the desolate. So what does this mean? There's only one place that I am aware of that you would have sacrifice and offering and call the holy place, and have something happen in this holy place that causes an abomination that lets all the Jewish people know to flee. Because this is wrong. This is wrong to happen in this place. And so that's the temple. The abomination that causes desolation that happens in a holy place where sacrifice and offerings would be the temple. That's what they did. That's what the purpose of the temple was, or part of the purpose. And so, but yet in Israel today there is no temple. And we know that in 70 AD the second temple was destroyed. Jesus is talking, and he told us that. And then here in verse 15, he talks about another temple that's going to have an abomination committed against it. And when those who see this that are in Judea flee to the mountains. So what is he? So again, this is what's interesting to me. So after the second of something, so if you have a second helping, the next one would be a third helping. After a second temple, the next one would be the third temple. And in the same generation that we're talking about, that Israel's become a nation, it is said that the third temple is coming, and now you can watch what's going on and what to look like. So we need to pay attention whether there's going to be a third temple, and if at some point that temple is going to have something happen to it that's going to cause it to be defiled and the Jewish people flee. I hope this is making sense. I find this very interesting. So we have the bookends of time. We have one generation, one lifespan, where Israel has become a nation on May 14th, 1948. Then in one lifespan, and we're late in that lifespan because it's been 73 years, that Jesus is saying there's going to be Jews, there's going to be a nation of Israel, there's going to be Jews in Judea, there's going to be a third temple, they're going to abide by the laws and keep the Sabbath, they're going to wait for a Messiah, a singular figure, who's going to do signs and wonders for them, but not to be deceived, because Jesus is saying he's the Messiah, he's the Christ, and not those who come other than when they see him in the clouds coming in great power and great glory. That's how he's going to come back. Okay, so I don't know how many that is. Was that 4 or 5 that are all happening right now? Another one that I found very interesting is, now again, Christianity is not a faith at this point. Well, I guess if you take the time that it's written, it is spreading throughout the world. But as of the recounting this, it says, and this gospel and the kingdom will be preached in all the world as a witness to the nations, and then the end will come. It's interesting to me that 2,000 years later, in this lifespan, never before have we had the technology for me to present this message and for somebody across the world to hear it. Now, people, because that's the question that people always say, right? Well, okay, sure, you can present the message of Jesus, and through the internet, through most countries, they can hear this, but not every country, not every person. And what's interesting to me is that when you look at what Elon Musk is doing, he's trying to build what's called Starlink, high-speed, low-latency broadband internet. When you look at PC Magazine, it says here that enter Starlink, the state, and so here you can see, what is Starlink? SpaceX's much-hyped satellite internet service explained. This is from March 15, 2021. Okay, so enter Starlink. The satellite internet system from SpaceX is capable of delivering 150 megabytes of internet speed to theoretically any place on the planet. Now, I don't think this is going to be the technology to make this happen, but again, it's very interesting that the technology is becoming available to make this prophecy come to pass. Never in the history of the world in the last 2,000 years would the message of Jesus be able to be taken to the entire world at one time. Even, like I said, even now, there's people who have not heard about Jesus. That's the question that always comes up, right? What about those ones? What about the ones in the Amazon forest? What about, And what Jesus is saying, that the gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all the world as a witness to the nations, and then the end will come. So this is something that needs to happen, and I find it very interesting that could it be technology based, where something like this creates internet and bring it to basically any place on the planet. I don't know. It would be something else. The Bible talks about it later, but again, I'm just sticking with the 2 chapters. But I find it interesting that technology is advancing, that this could be what fulfills it. So again, I think land of Israel, Jews in the land. They've kept the rules like the Sabbath. There's Jews in Judea. They're talking. There's a mention of another temple after the one that Jesus talked about, the second temple being destroyed. There'd be a future temple, so that's 5. Possible about the gospel going out through the entire nations, and then the end will come. We're seeing technology being developed that could theoretically bring the internet and those who share the message of Jesus to the entire planet. So that's 6. So we're already at 6. And we've talked about what the probabilities of 8 would look like. And again, I might have missed some, but you kind of get the idea here. So let's go to the next chapter, that is Revelation 6. So this one is a little bit more complicated. But again, I hope this stuff makes sense. I hope that you feel like I'm not making this stuff up here. I hope that you'll take the time. That you'll take the time and do your own research. I don't want somebody just to watch this and think, yeah. Like I said, this stuff changed my life, because if you listen to my video, that's the stuff that I went through. I had no reason to believe in any of this. But I thought, if Jesus could predict the future so far in advance that he would have no clue what the world of today would look like, and if the Bible could do that, and I could see all these things happening, it's not just one. It's not that just Israel became a nation. It's not that they're looking to build a temple. It's not. It's all of it. It's all of it put together. This little one, this little one, this one, this one. This isn't coincidence. I'm not a highly educated person. I barely graduated high school. I've made a career for myself. I think I'm a semi-intelligent person, but I'm not a genius. This doesn't take a lot of study. It took a willingness on my part to ask the question, is this true? To not care whether it was or wasn't. I needed to find out. I didn't care. I don't believe this because my family believes it. I don't believe it because it was the church that I grew up in that believes it. I was willing to walk away. In fact, like I said, I was willing to destroy other people's faith at one point, because I hated how this stuff made me feel, about how I was embarrassed to be a churchgoer, to be a person who said they believed in Jesus, but never had any evidence to back it up. This is what changed my life, and I want to change yours if I can. So I hope that this makes sense. So in Revelation 6, regardless of what Christian end time view that you look at, Revelation 6 is the first chapter where things start to go bad. And from 6 to 18, chapter 18, is all the bad stuff. That's why people are like, Revelation is doom and gloom and all these horrible things that the Bible predicts, and all these people are going to die. Why would God do that? He's such a sadistic monster. And then he's going to come back in the clouds in chapter 19, on a white horse, and save what's left of the world. The Bible is a warning. See, a lot of people say, well, God doesn't exist because bad things happen. most of the bad things that happen, we cause. We've been given free will. We've almost, and I know many Christians are probably going to say, why, climate change is a hoax. No. The ice caps are melting. Natural disasters are increasing. And places are becoming hotter. The fish in the sea are dying. Species all around the planet are becoming extinct. We are cutting down the rainforests, which I believe scientists call the lungs of the planet. We are drilling massive holes into the crust of the earth to look for oil and all gas and all that kind of stuff. We are expanding and destroying ecosystems. Now, I'm not here to worship the planet. I'm not here to say that Mother Earth or whatever is revolting. No, this is God's creation. We're affecting life on this planet by the choices that we make. And as I talked about in the first video, we choose death. We choose to think things, say things, do things to ourselves and to others that may not kill them physically, but it could damage them emotionally. That's what sin is. And we do things every day to the planet. We say that we care about the life that we're living. And what's going to become apparent if Bible prophecy is true is that it's not the emissions that are going to kill it. It's the war that's going to damage the planet. It's the next great war that the Bible predicts is coming. And I'm not here to say that God wants this to happen. He is saying that we as a human population, as a human species, are going to use the free will to kill each other. We are going to choose that. And then once we've destroyed the planet, we're going to believe in a leader who promises to save humanity, who's going to do some signs and wonders. That's what the Bible talks about. Instead of saying, you know what, God, I'm sorry for choosing death. I'm sorry that I've hurt other people. I'm sorry that I'm hurting myself. I'm sorry that I'm hurting the planet. Please forgive me. And know that God loves you and that He will forgive you. The reason Jesus comes back in Matthew 24 is that it says, for there will be a great tribulation such as not been since the beginning of the world until this time, nor shall ever be. And unless those days were shortened, no flesh would be saved. But for the sake of for the elect's sake, those days will be shortened. Jesus is saying, if He let this all play out, no life we would destroy each other completely. But for the sake of those who believe in Him, those days will be shortened. Think about it like this. Let's say you had a teenager that you tried to tell them, don't do this. This is going to cause harm for yourself. And they get into trouble, and then you keep covering for them, and you keep covering them. Eventually, they're going to have to learn their own lesson. You're going to have to say, Lord, I hope that they're protected, but they need to learn a lesson. You just hope it doesn't kill them. But we can't. God has been watching over us. I know it doesn't feel like that, but the time that is coming, He's going to let us see the results, the full results of our choices. And He's saying, I don't want this for you. But we don't believe He exists. We don't believe that He cares about us because He's silent. Because we cry out and He's like, well, God is going to let us know He exists. for our benefit, so that we will come to him. We will say sorry. We will know that he loves us, that he doesn't want us to destroy ourselves. Because that's the path that we're on. We all know it. Science is telling us, we got 10, 15, 20 years. If we don't change things, that's why you've got people saying, we need to do this now. And the Bible says, you're not going to. We're not going to change. So here, I know that Revelation sounds complicated, and it is. There are some things, and the reason is because only when these things are fulfilled will we understand that the Bible talked about them. Christians try to speculate, they try to read through this book, they try to understand what is going to come in the future, and as this generation continues to roll along, we find out that many of the things that we thought aren't true. We are speculation. But what we do know is that there are things that are happening that are true. It's just how we understand events going to be playing out. We probably often guess wrong. But when they do play out, the Bible doesn't change its words. We just have a better understanding as things play out. So that's one thing to understand about Bible prophecy is I'm not going to get in too far into the future. I'm not going to tell you. I'm going to go through a scenario next video, but in this one I'm not going to go through that big of a scenario. I just want to show you the things that I see happening right now. So it says here, now I saw the Lamb open up the seals, and I heard one of the 4 living creatures say with a voice of thunder, come and see. And I looked, and behold, a white horse. He who sat on it had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he went out conquering and to conquer. I want to go through, we'll come back to this first, but I want you to kind of hear that first. So now we go to Revelation 19. And it says here, now I saw heaven opened, and behold, a white horse. Well, that's interesting. And he who sat on it was called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he judges and makes war. His eyes were like a flame of fire, and on his head he had many crowns. Well, that's also interesting. He had a name written that no one knew except himself. He was clothed with a robe dipped in blood. His name was called the Word of God, and the armies of heaven, clothed in fine linen, white and clean, followed him on white horses. Now out of his mouth goes a sharp sword. Well, that's, again, another weapon. That's interesting. And with it he should strike the nations, and he himself will rule them with a rod of iron. He himself treads the winepress of the fierceness and the wrath of Almighty God. And he has on his robe, on his thigh, a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. The reason I call your attention to this passage, again, I understand when you read this, and if you're a skeptic, you might be like, this is insane. This is crazy. But the reason I point out this description is because when you go back to Revelation 6, the first events leading up that will start the entire period of time leading up to Jesus' return, we see, and I saw, and behold, a white horse, a rider on a white horse. He who sat on it had a bow, not a sword. He had a crown, not crowns. And he went out to conquering and to conquer, where Jesus is coming back and he will rule the nations. Many people, many Bible prophecy teachers understand and see these connections and say, this is the imposter. This is the false Christ, false Messiah that Jesus was warning about in Matthew 24. He comes like Jesus. He'll come on the scene. He will come in as a man of peace, right? That he only had a bow, no arrow. So he conquers the nations. He creates an empire for himself, but he does it through peace. But he is the imposter to the genuine article in Revelation 19. Again, I'm not here to criticize the Jews' belief. If Jesus is a Messiah, then any other Messiah that they're waiting for is a false one. And again, so it's interesting that when we're talking about the beginning, we're late in the generation, we're 73 years now into it, that it's interesting that in Revelation 6, the beginning events that will go from Revelation 6 to Revelation 18, that whole terrible period that people talk about, Revelation being such a terrible and doom and gloom and world-ending book, this is where it begins. And that's the first one. The second seal, when he opened the second seal, I heard a second living creature saying, "Come and see." And another horse, fiery red, went out, and it was granted to the one who sat on it to take peace from the earth, and that people should kill one another, and was given to him a great sword. This is war, right? We've heard the four horsemen of the apocalypse. Well, this is it. This is war. Again, God does not want this to happen. But we have rejected him. We have destroyed his planet. We are destroying each other. And we will choose another. Call it a world war. Call it a great war. But a great war is coming to this planet. And we can see that. We can see when we look at... This was an article from American Military News. March 11, 2021. U.S. will lose fast in a war with China, Air Force simulation shows. From the Examiner, March 12, 2021. What U.S. war with China about Taiwan would look like. Okay, so again, I'm not here to preach. There is hope. But these are the things that we're going to choose to happen. And again, if it doesn't, then I'm the fool. But these are the things in the order that they're talking about these things happening. Third seal, scarcity on earth. When he opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, "Come and see." So I looked, and behold, a black horse, and he who sat on it had a pair of scales in his hand. And I heard a voice in the midst of the four living creatures say, "A quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not harm the oil and the wine." So the question is, what is a quart of wheat? If you study a quart of wheat, you're going to find out that it's basically enough wheat to make a large loaf of bread. And a denarius, and like I said, don't trust me on any of this. And a denarius was a day's wage for a worker. So when you look at this and you've got scales in his hand, the first thing that you figure out is that, and like you've got Black Friday and a Black Swan and a Black Monday and a Black Tuesday. Okay, so this is about finances. This is about global finances. That a quart of wheat, enough to make a large loaf of bread, will cost a day's wages. Okay, and 3 quarts of barley will cost a day's wages. This is talking about food, or the ingredients for food, costing a day's wages. Okay, that's hyperinflation. That's a collapse of a currency. But this isn't one currency. This isn't one country. This is the world. Now that's a pretty big prophecy. Right? It would be one thing to say, oh, this prophecy must be fulfilled because this small country had hyperinflation and a collapse of a currency. No, this is global. These events are global. That is the context of when you read all of these, right? Over the earth, right? For the fourth one, peace taken from the earth, conquering out over the earth, right? O Lord, holy and true, that you judge the avenger of blood of those who dwell on the earth. And the stars of heaven fell to the earth. These things are going to be felt all over the earth. So, are we seeing a possible global hyperinflation and collapse of currencies? Well, what's interesting here from CoinDesk, this is dated April 30th, 2021, updated May 1st, 2021. China is opting out of the U.S.-run financial system. If the U.S. government doesn't lead financial innovation, China will leapfrog it and control the world's emerging monetary infrastructure. That's what this article is about. Okay. Here's Peter Schiff. Again, this isn't... I don't care whether you like Peter Schiff or not. I know some people do, some people don't. It doesn't matter. I'm not here to endorse somebody. I'm here to show different people talking about different things. So this is from March 25th, 2021.
In this scenario which you've described before, I mean, you're calling for an unprecedented economic disaster following this unprecedented stimulus, both in the US and globally. But what does that look like, Peter? Describe that in all the vivid, ugly details.
I don't know if I could describe it if it hasn't happened yet. I mean, we can look at other countries and how, they've dealt with these problems. But we're in a situation where we have so much debt, and in fact, Janet Yellen was asked a question today. I was watching her in a Q&A,
right.
And the person questioning her said, hey, when you were Fed chair, you did warn that we had too much debt, and here you are now as Secretary of the Treasury, we have a lot more debt. I think it was 70% of GDP when she said it was a problem, and now it's over 100%, and that's just debt held by the public, not total debt.
Right.
The question was, why aren't you worried anymore about the debt? And, her answer to that question was that, well, interest rates are really low. And the reason it's not a problem is because the rates are so low. And so servicing the debt is not that big a burden given how low rates are. But it's unfortunate that the senator who asked her that question didn't follow up with a better question. What happens when interest rates go up? I mean, isn't it reckless and irresponsible to say we can afford all this debt because temporarily we have these low rates of interest, knowing that the national debt is financed mostly with short-term paper, and the government has to constantly roll over these T-bills, and, they're going to get the
Tired of managing Kafka or Postgres? We'll
Sorry
run your
about
open
those
source
guys.
data infra in the cloud at ivan.io.
prevailing rate. Well, if you have this huge amount of debt and the only reason there's not a crisis is because interest rates are low, what happens if they're not low? What happens if interest rates are high? And I think that's the box the Federal Reserve is in, because the Federal Reserve knows the only thing between the U.S. government and default or insolvency is artificially low interest rates. So if the Federal Reserve knows if it raises interest rates, it bankrupts the government, how is the Federal Reserve going to fight inflation? Because if this pickup in inflation is not transitory, and obviously the longer the Fed waits to acknowledge it's not transitory, the bigger the inflation problem becomes. And so if inflation is at 5 or 6 or 7% officially by the time the Fed realizes that it wasn't transitory, how does it fight that inflation without bankrupting the U.S. government? The answer is it can't. So my thinking is, if it can't fight inflation without bankrupting the U.S. government, it won't fight the inflation, which means it bankrupts the U.S. public because it destroys the value of the dollar.
So, Peter, what does all of this inflation, which, as you say, at some point or another has to begin, mean for the dollar, and particularly for the dollar's status as the global reserve currency?
Yeah, well, I don't think it's going to mean the end of the dollar. I think it may mean the end of the dollar as we know it, as the world's reserve currency. And so a world in which the dollar is no longer a reserve currency is going to be a world in which the dollar buys a lot less. The purchasing power of the dollar, the exchange rate of the dollar relative to other currencies is going to depreciate substantially, especially when you consider how many dollars the Federal Reserve is going to be printing in order to enable all of this government spending. And remember, the only way the U.S. government can service the debt that it has is if the Federal Reserve provides the money, because they're never going to get it from the taxpayers directly through taxes. They're going to get it indirectly through inflation. So this is massive money printing and monetary debasement. And
so there's a little bit for you. Here's another video. This is done May 13th, 2021.
Inflation is picking up fast
faster than we've seen in decades. But is it temporary? You came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. Today we're going to talk about the real deal. I'm talking about inflation and where it hits you the most. Consumer prices rising right now, and of course, the money is running out fast. You might see that Jerome Powell is telling you it's transitory. Well, the multimillionaire Jerome Powell, Fed Chair Jerome Powell, helicopter Jerome Powell, he is basically out there to tell you that this is only temporary. Don't worry whatsoever. I'm going to show you the statistics today, and of course I will bring that to you in the Money GPS insights and what you can do about it. Let's get into it right away.
So Peter Schiff isn't the only one that's talking about it. And what I want to show you is that here's right from the Fed. Okay, you can go look at the Fed, St. Louis Fed here.org, and look at the purchasing power of the US dollar. So if we look at in 1914, I think it was, the US dollar was worth $1. Okay, then the Fed was created, took over, and it's kind of jumped around. Well, here in 2020, October 2020, the dollar's worth, if you had $1 when a dollar was worth $1, it's now worth 3.8 cents. And it shows $100 is $100 and $3.80. So the math works out the same. And the reason being is that inflation, yes, it's the rise in price of something, but it's basically the devaluation of a dollar. A dollar does not buy the same thing as it did last year. A dollar, and then the year before, and the year before. So if we look, here's an inflation calculator. If in 1913 you had $100, in 2021, the same item that cost $100 in 1913 would cost you $2,697.52 today. That's what happens when when inflation devalues the currency. Now, with all the money printing that has been going on, when you don't create goods and services, when you create money from printing it instead of the goods and services, instead of the GDP, then you're adding money to the supply. The more money that's in the supply, the less each dollar is worth. And they're printing trillions and trillions of dollars. And that is what the big concern is. And so, like Peter Schiff said, so as prices go up, that we're seeing them start to climb. We see it in lumber, we see it in steel, we see it in gas, we see it in food, we see it in housing prices, we see it in the stock market, we see it in cryptocurrency, we see everything is going up in price. And the question is, if it's not transitory, if this is not just a blip on the radar and everything is going to work itself out and prices continue to climb, the only way to fight inflation would be to raise interest rates to slow the machine down, to bring prices back down so that people aren't buying as many houses and buying as much stuff if interest rates are higher. They have to focus more on spending their money on debt instead of going out and spending it on the products that are out there. But if interest rates go up, then the government has to spend more to service the debt that they have. And the current debt in the US is $28 trillion. In 2008, before the Great Recession, it was $9 trillion. It has tripled in the last just over a decade. So if interest rates go up, then the country has to service that debt, or it'll go into default. It'll go bankrupt. And like Peter Schiff said, the choice is going to be, you either fight inflation, fight the rising prices by increasing interest rates and bankrupt the country, or you bankrupt the people of the country. And because the U.S. currency is the major currency, you could bankrupt a good portion of the world. because their currencies will fail. And that's the big concern. So when we talk about a global economic collapse, where paying for the ingredients to make a loaf of bread is a day's wages, and the difference between inflation and hyperinflation is simply the speed in which the inflation takes over. And if it starts to climb and go, and its trajectory skyrockets, then you have hyperinflation, and you would have it over much of the globe. So could we see a war between the US and China and its allies? Because on one hand, you have US, Canada, Europe, South Korea, India, those countries on one side. On the other, you have China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, etc. And you have these proxy wars in the Middle East. You have all these alliances between these nations, Turkey and Russia now creating alliance. And interesting that Turkey is also part of NATO, so it'll be interesting what Turkey decides to do. But there's tensions growing around the world, and are we going to see these things? If the Jewish people are looking for the Messiah, and that Messiah to be revealed to the world in this coming September, and then all these things follow, be interesting to see what the next couple months. And I'm not calling this. I'm not saying that any dates. I'm saying this is what's happening around the world. This is what Jewish people don't believe in the New Testament. They don't believe in the words of Jesus or the book of Revelation. Yet it's interesting for me to see all these things come together, and to see whether we see this revelation of the Messiah, whether we see a global war come after that, or simultaneously, or however that works, whether we see global collapse of the economic system and hyperinflation, whether we see massive death, right? Because the fourth seal is death on the earth. So I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and the name who sat on it was Death, and Hades followed with him, and the power was given to them over a fourth of the earth to kill with sword, with hunger, with death, by the beasts of the earth. Then we see the cry of the martyrs. The fifth seal. I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slain for the word of God and the testimony which they held. And they cried with a loud voice, saying, God, how long, holy and true, until you judge and avenge our blood on those who dwell on the earth? I'll cover this probably in the next video, because this sixth seal is an interesting one. But if we had 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then I'll cover the 11th one next video. We're getting beyond the probability of these 8, of what the probability was for 8 prophecies being fulfilled. We're starting to get into double digits here to see whether or not these things are going to happen in the very near future. That will kick off a period of time of chaos and destruction around the world. And the hope is that I present to you is that Jesus is God. He told us in this generation that these things would happen, that we would be at this place that we are right now. See, the Bible talks about some interesting things. When we go back to Matthew 24, it says here, they will deliver you up to tribulation and kill you. You will be hated by nations for my name's sake. And then many will be offended. They will betray one another. They will hate one another. And because lawlessness will abound, the love of many will grow cold. The Bible talks about Know this first, that scoffers will come in the last days, walking according to their own lusts, and saying, where's the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were from the beginning of creation. I find that when Christians talk about Jesus' return, that's what you get. You get scoffing and you get mocking. And I did this too. I'm not saying that I'm guiltless in any of this. That's a fulfillment to a prophecy. Because we believe that, well, Christians have always thought that, Jesus was coming back. Nothing's changed. The belief is still the same. And yet I hope that I've shown you that that's not what the Bible says. Even if Christians always believe that, the Bible has given us this generation, this one lifespan, that all these things are going to come to pass. Sorry, I have to look this up because I can't remember where it's found. Oh yeah, okay. So here, 1 Timothy 3. All right. Oops. Is that first? Sorry. 2 Timothy 3. Okay. I want to read this. Like I said, I took 2 chapters, but there are other verses throughout the Bible. But know this, that in the last days, perilous times will come. Well, am I talking about some perilous times coming? For men will be lovers of themselves. Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, whatever the new app is. Lovers of money. The whole reason we're in this mess financially is because the greed is so unbelievable around the world right now, and specifically in the US. Boasters, proud, blasphemers, people who say God doesn't exist, God doesn't care, you're an idiot for believing these fairy tales. Disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, unloving, unforgiving, slanderers, without self-control, brutal, despisers of good, traitors, headstrong, haughty, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having the form of godliness but denying its power. How many of us, Christians, non-Christians, have this form of self-righteousness? Right? Whether it's your own morality or people use that it's the Bible says, God says, and they have their own morality. This is the society we live in. No one says thank you anymore. No one. If it doesn't go with their sense of holiness, right, and righteousness, nobody wants to hear it. Divorces are up. We're unloving towards each other. Nobody cares about other people. And if it is, it's probably because of their own self-righteousness. Oh, look, I give to charity. Look, I care about these people. I care about that. But you meet them on the street and you want to walk across on the other side. I do the same thing. I'm not saying that I'm any better, but this is the times that we live in. And so there's a lot of passages in the Bible that talk about this. There's about these different things that we can apply, that says in the last days, this is what it's going to be like. I've chosen 2 chapters, and I hope that by the end of the next video, you'll have a clear picture of what the Bible talks about. I'm going to go through a timeline so that you can see, but I hope that these 3 videos, when they're all done, make a difference in your life, that shows you that God is real. He loves you. He came into this world in the form of God and man in Jesus, lived a perfect life, willingly died when we hated him, when the world wanted him dead, and killed him. He willingly gave his life. Nobody took it from him. He willingly laid it down. That was his purpose, to come, pay the price for the death that we bring to ourselves, to each other, and to the world. I don't care who you are. I don't care what color your skin is. I don't care what your background is. I don't care who you love. I want you to hear this right now. Whatever the church has said to you, whatever Christians have said to you in the past, know that God loves you. In John 3, Jesus says, and we've all heard this verse, but maybe we just need to hear it one more time. For God so loved the world. You're part of the world. He loves you. That he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world. How many of you feel that God is condemning you? How many of you have been told by other Christians that God condemns you for the life that you live? But the Bible says right here, Jesus is saying, for God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. We have all brought death to ourselves, to each other, and to the planet, as I explained in the last video. This is what sin is. We choose death instead of life. And Jesus came to pay that price for our choices. He came to forgive us. He came to say, I love you. I know you're imperfect. I know you're flawed. I know you're broken. I know you've got baggage from here, and around the block. I know you've been hurt. I know you've been lied to. I know you've been betrayed. I know you've betrayed others and you've lied to others. I know you've done all these things. I think one of the best things about being in a good relationship is when you start dating, when you first meet a person, you put on your best face, you get all dressed up, and you keep the conversation light, and you keep it, and you don't want it to get too deep too fast, right? You guard yourself a little bit. You want to see, look, can we build some trust here? And as you get to know the person, and you find that you like this person, you like spending time with them, and you like hanging around them, you start thinking about the things, and so you share a little bit about yourself, and they accept that. And then the more that you share and the more that they accept, and you start building a friendship and a relationship, there's always those few things inside that you think, if I tell this person these things about me, is it going to be a deal breaker? Is it going to end the relationship? Is it going to damage what we have that could be great, that is great right now? Is it going to change that? And you're afraid. You have these things that you're afraid to share with them, because what if they don't accept you? What if it's the one thing that it's going to just end the relationship, and you're afraid of that? And so maybe you never share these things. Maybe it takes a really long time that you just say, you know what, there's something that you need to know about me, or there's something that I've done in the past, or whatever it is, and you share that, and then they accept you. And you breathe this huge sigh of relief that they accept you for who you are. That's a great place to be in a relationship. Well, God knows everything that you've ever thought, everything that you've ever said, everything that you've ever done and will ever do. And he is saying that he sees you through the entire scope of time, your entire life from beginning to end. And he says, I love you. I accept you. I sent my Son into the world. I came in human form so that you would have that he would pay the price, and you would have life eternal, that you would have a relationship with God. So what do we have to do? Well, religion says do this, do this, do this, do that, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, and maybe God will accept you. That's what religion says. Jesus said he came to us. He accepted us. He knew who we are, and he loves us. And I'm going to do this throughout each of the videos because I believe it's so important that you hear this. But God, in Romans 5:8, but God demonstrates his own love toward us, that while we were still sinners, while we were still choosing death, while we hated him, and we were enemies of God, Christ died for us. The price has been paid. Jesus has already died, rose again, and will come back. But the price has already been paid in full. And instead of trusting in your own works, instead of trusting in your own righteousness, just trust in Jesus that he's paid the price. I'm going to read you a passage in Isaiah 64. It says, all of us have become like one who is unclean, and all of our righteous acts are like filthy rags. We all shrivel up like a leaf, and like the wind our sins sweep us away. In this passage, in the original Hebrew, the word filthy rags means menstrual rags. It means decaying menstrual rags. That's what filthy rags means. And I'll show you. Sorry. I should have looked this up beforehand. Oh, here it is. Okay. Sorry. I could read it right here. The filthy word in translation of Hebrew, the word ida, which literally means the bodily fluids from a woman's menstrual cycle. The word rage is a translation of begged, meaning word rag or garment. Thus, the righteous acts are considered by God as a repugnant, soiled, feminine hygiene product. See, the reason is because our righteous works, all the things that we consider good, will never make us perfect. We are imperfect people. We either do the righteous acts for the wrong reasons. There's a show, I think it's called The Good Place, and in one of it where the main character has to make up these points, right, to her righteous points, but because she's doing it to enter heaven, all the motive has made all the acts that she does wrong, evil, bad, right? She doesn't get any good points. Her points, I think, even decrease because the motive is wrong. We do things, these righteous acts, for our own self good feelings, right? But God is saying all of that is meaningless. He doesn't expect you to do good things. He's paid the price. He just wants to be in a relationship with you. He already knows who you are. He knows all the good things you've done, all the bad things you've done, and all the good and bad things you'll ever do. And he loves you. And so instead of trusting in the things that you do and thinking that it's going to earn you favor with God, know that God already loves you. He created you. He loves you. There's nothing that can change that. There's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can do or have ever done that can change that. And if you believe in Jesus and the price that he came to this earth to pay on your behalf, to pay for the death that you bring, you will be saved and you'll have a relationship with God. It's not about magic words. It's about what's in your heart. It's about saying, sorry, God, I've messed up. Hopefully this video shows that God does exist. He has predicted the future and the future is coming to pass. But because we are blinded to his miracles and to his works, we're going to see things on a far bigger scale. He's going to let us see the consequences of our actions, that we can't save this planet. We can't save ourselves. The answer to humanity's survival is not in us. It's in him. He will save us. He will return and restore humanity and restore the planet to those who want a relationship with him. If you don't want a relationship with him, if you say, you know what, I don't care, God can show me that he exists, I don't care, I want to have nothing to do with him, then he's not going to force you. But if you want to know, if you say, you know what, if God exists, if God does love me, I want to know that. I want to know why I was made. I want to know why I exist. What is my purpose? And to know that if you trust in him, if you believe in him and say, look, I'm sorry for the things that I've done, please forgive me, he will forgive you. He loves you. He's waiting for you to take that step of faith and just say, this is all I have. This is all I've got. Take it and use it. Please show me what the purpose I have is, and he will change your life. He changed mine. I'm alive today because of him. And that's why I share this message with you. So I hope that this video has made some sense. I hope it helps you. And I hope that when I finish this 3-part series, I hope that you'll take the time to listen to it and watch it as well. And I hope it brings some hope to your life. As bad as the news might be of what we will choose and what might come to pass in the near future, we can trust that God is real, that he has loved us, he has told us and warned us, so that we can accept him, so that we can come to him in humility and just say, God, please forgive me and save me. And if I should die, that I'll be in heaven. And while we're alive, to walk in a relationship with him, learn who he is. And just, a lot of people think that prayer is this, bow our heads, close our eyes. No, it's a cry of the heart. As long as you're just be honest with God. He knows where you're at. He knows what you're struggling with. If you're like, God, I'm really struggling with this. I've sworn at God. I've thrown things across the room because I've been pissed off at him. I've cried in the darkness, and I've raised my hands in joy and rejoiced when things in my life, that I see him working. God can handle our emotions, and he can handle our hurt, and he can handle our baggage. So if we let him. So I hope this is an encouragement to you, because I think the days might get pretty dark, but I hope that knowing these things are coming, knowing that there is hope, and that God is in control, and he loves us, and he doesn't want this for us, but unfortunately, I think we're going to choose these types of things. These things are coming, but he will take care of us, and he'll protect us. I pray that you would just accept him today. Thank you so much for listening.